Have you ever felt like no matter how hard you try, your thoughts just seem to lead you in circles? Like every decision, every problem, every moment of doubt is a trap you can't escape. What if I told you that the way you think, right now, isn't just limiting you, it's controlling your life? Today, I will teach you how to think correctly, not just harder, not just faster, but in a way that transforms your reality. Most people go through life as if they are passengers on a train, watching the scenery pass by without ever realizing they are the ones steering. They assume their thoughts are neutral, or worse, that they are reality itself. But here's the truth: your thoughts are not reality. They are a reflection of habits, beliefs, fears, and influences that you've absorbed over time, some consciously, many unconsciously. And if you want to think correctly, the very first step is awareness, truly noticing what is happening inside your own mind. Awareness is simple in concept, but profound in effect. It's about catching yourself in the act of thinking before you react automatically. Most people live their lives reacting, responding to stimuli, letting emotions dictate decisions, and believing that what comes to mind must be correct. But correct thinking never comes from blind reaction. It begins with observation. Start by paying attention to your thoughts as if you are watching someone else. Don't judge them, just notice. What patterns keep repeating? What fears, biases, or assumptions do you rely on without question? The moment you recognize these patterns, you gain a measure of control over them. You might be surprised how chaotic your thinking actually is. Thoughts jump from one thing to another without reason, sometimes pulling you toward anxiety, frustration, or indecision. And this chaos feels normal because it's what most people experience every day. But here's the secret: just noticing that chaos is powerful. Awareness transforms you from a passive participant in your own mind into an active observer. And the observer always has a choice. One thought can be accepted, another can be questioned, another discarded entirely. Without awareness, you give your mind free rein to dictate your life. With awareness, you take the first step toward mastery. Another layer of awareness is understanding the source of your thoughts. Ask yourself, where did this belief come from? Whose voice am I hearing when I think this? Many thoughts are inherited, borrowed from parents, society, or peers, and they do not serve your life, they limit it. When you can separate your authentic reasoning from these external influences, you start to see the gaps, the inconsistencies, the areas where your thinking has been unconsciously manipulated. And once you see them, you can correct them. Correct thinking is not about having no thoughts, it's about knowing which thoughts are yours and which are inherited, and then deliberately choosing which ones to entertain. Awareness also teaches patience. Our minds are addicted to quick judgments, instant reactions, and automatic conclusions. But when you pause to observe, you give yourself the chance to consider, to reflect, to weigh evidence instead of assuming it. This patience is the foundation of deliberate, rational thinking. Every great thinker, every innovator, every leader knows this. Control over the mind begins with noticing the mind. So, take a moment now and look inward. Notice a thought that is troubling you, a belief you take for granted, or a reaction you have repeated countless times. See it clearly. Name it, understand it. Awareness isn't a one-time act, it's a habit, a discipline. And once you commit to seeing your mind for what it truly is, the path toward correct thinking becomes clear. Because before you can change the way you think, before you can separate fact from assumption, before you can ask the right questions or structure your mind logically, you must first see yourself thinking. Awareness is the mirror in which correct thinking begins to take shape. And without this mirror, you are simply wandering in the dark, mistaking reflection for reality. Once you become aware of your own thought patterns, the next step is learning to separate fact from assumption. This is where most people stumble, because they believe that what they think must be true. But thinking something doesn't make it real. Reality exists independently of our opinions, fears, or desires, and yet most of us live our lives making decisions based on what we assume to be true rather than what actually is. Correct thinking requires clarity, And clarity begins with distinguishing what you know from what you merely believe. Think about it for a moment. How often have you acted on a thought that later turned out to be false? Perhaps you assumed someone disliked you because of a fleeting expression, or you believed you couldn't achieve something because of one past failure. These are assumptions, not facts. And assumptions, left unchecked, shape your actions, your emotions, and ultimately your life. The first step in separating fact from assumption is asking yourself a simple question: do I know this, or do I believe it? The answer will reveal whether you are reacting to reality or responding to a story you have invented in your mind. Our minds are naturally inclined to fill in gaps with assumptions. When information is missing, the brain creates a narrative to make sense of it, often using fear or desire as a filter. Imagine a detective piecing together a case, but never bothering to check the evidence. That's exactly what happens when we act on assumptions. Correct thinking requires that we become the detectives of our own minds, examining each thought, each belief with scrutiny. Look for evidence. Test the assumptions. Ask yourself, how do I know this is true? What proof exists? Could it be otherwise? By doing this, you begin to separate what is factual from what is imagined, and the clarity you gain transforms decision making. Separating fact from assumption also demands humility. You have to admit that you might be wrong, that what you take for granted as truth may simply be a construction of your mind. This is uncomfortable because most people equate confidence with correctness, but true strength lies in acknowledging uncertainty. When you accept that your assumptions may be flawed, you open the door to learning, to insight, and to thinking correctly. The moment you stop clinging to unverified beliefs is the moment you start seeing reality as it is, not as your mind wants it to be. This process doesn't mean you ignore intuition or emotion, but you place them in their proper context. Intuition can be powerful, but it is not a substitute for evidence. Feelings are informative, but they are not facts. By consistently questioning what is real and what is assumed, you develop a mental discipline that allows you to act from reality rather than reaction. You become deliberate instead of impulsive, precise instead of scattered, rational instead of swayed by whatever emotion happens to pass through at the moment. The benefits of mastering this skill extend far beyond decision making. When you can clearly distinguish fact from assumption, you gain confidence in your thoughts, reduce unnecessary stress, and see opportunities and threats more accurately. Relationships improve because you stop projecting fears or judgments onto others. Work and creativity flourish because you are no longer trapped by imagined limitations. Your mind, once cluttered by false assumptions, becomes a powerful instrument for insight and action. So, as you move forward in this journey of learning to think correctly, remember this: clarity is your ally and reality is your guide. Do not accept thoughts at face value. Question them, test them. Know what is fact and recognize what is assumption. This skill is not optional, it is essential, because every moment you act on assumptions, you give away your power. The mind that can see clearly, free from false beliefs, is the mind that can act decisively, wisely, and correctly. Once you have learned to distinguish fact from assumption, the next essential step is mastering the art of questioning. This is not about doubting everything for the sake of doubt, nor is it about being cynical. It is about training your mind to probe deeply, to dig beneath the surface, and to examine the foundations of every thought, belief, and conclusion you hold. Correct thinking is not passive, it is active. And active thinking demands questions. Most people accept information as it comes. They read headlines, listen to opinions, follow advice, and rarely stop to consider, is this true? Is this complete? What might I be missing? The problem is that our minds naturally seek comfort and closure. We want answers that feel right, even if they are incomplete or inaccurate. We stop at the first explanation that makes sense, because thinking is hard work and questioning requires effort. But if you are serious about learning to think correctly, you must embrace the discomfort of questioning. You must cultivate a mindset that refuses to settle for surface level understanding. Asking the right questions is like turning on a light in a dark room. Suddenly, things you took for granted are visible, inconsistencies are revealed, and gaps in your understanding become clear. For example, when faced with a challenge, instead of saying, "I can't do this," you ask, "What is stopping me? What evidence do I have that this is true? Could there be another way?" Notice how the shift in focus changes your perspective. A question opens possibilities. An assumption closes them. The more skilled you become at asking meaningful questions, the more your mind expands, and the more control you have over your thoughts. There is also power in questioning your own motivations. Why do I want this? Why am I afraid of that? Why am I convinced this is the only way? When you ask these questions honestly, you begin to uncover the hidden forces that shape your thinking. Most of our mental energy is spent unconsciously defending positions, chasing validation, or avoiding discomfort. By questioning the underlying why of your thoughts, you bring these forces into the light, and once they are visible, they can be managed, redirected, or discarded. Questioning others is just as crucial, but it must be done with clarity and purpose. People will present ideas confidently, but confidence is not proof. Every expert, every teacher, every leader, even your closest friends, can be mistaken. By asking questions, you gather evidence, test assumptions, and see beyond appearances. You develop a shield against manipulation and misinformation because correct thinking is grounded in inquiry, not blind acceptance. The art of questioning is also about curiosity. A curious mind does not fear uncertainty, it welcomes it. It sees every problem as an opportunity to learn, every contradiction as a clue, every challenge as a doorway. When you cultivate curiosity alongside discipline, your thinking becomes both rigorous and flexible. You no longer accept the first answer, you seek the best answer. You no longer react, you investigate. You no longer assume, you verify. Remember, questioning is not a one-time act, it is a habit, a continuous practice. Every thought, every belief, every decision should be examined through the lens of inquiry. The mind that questions relentlessly is the mind that grows, that innovates, that sees clearly. And the mind that sees clearly is the mind that acts correctly. If you want to think correctly, do not settle for easy answers. Do not allow your mind to drift on autopilot. Question everything, starting with yourself, because the power of correct thinking lies not in knowing the answer, but in knowing how to find it. Once you have mastered the art of questioning, the next step is learning to structure your thoughts logically and strategically. Thinking correctly is not about letting your mind wander freely, chasing every impulse or idea as it arises. That may feel creative, even exciting, but without structure, your thoughts are chaotic, scattered, and often misleading. Correct thinking requires organization. It requires a framework that allows you to evaluate, connect, and act on ideas with clarity and precision. Imagine your mind as a library. You have countless books, ideas, and experiences stacked on every shelf. But if they are randomly scattered, finding the right book at the right time is nearly impossible. Structuring your thoughts is like cataloging that library. You group similar ideas together, place evidence alongside conclusions, and create a system that allows you to navigate complex problems without getting lost. When your thoughts are organized, you can move from confusion to clarity, from indecision to action. One of the most powerful tools in structuring thought is prioritization. Not every idea, observation, or piece of information carries equal weight. Some are central to solving a problem, while others are distractions. Correct thinking requires the ability to separate what matters from what doesn't. This is not about dismissing possibilities arbitrarily, it's about evaluating evidence, identifying relevance, and focusing your mental energy where it will have the greatest impact. By doing this, you prevent your mind from being overwhelmed by noise and instead direct it toward meaningful insight. Another crucial aspect is sequencing. Thoughts are often interdependent. One idea may rely on another, and jumping ahead without understanding the foundation leads to errors. Structuring your thoughts strategically means recognizing these relationships and arranging your reasoning in a logical order. You start with what you know for certain, build on evidence, and move toward conclusions step by step. This approach transforms scattered ideas into coherent arguments and complex problems into manageable solutions. Structuring your thoughts also requires reflection. It's not enough to arrange ideas. You must step back and examine whether your structure holds up under scrutiny. Are your connections valid? Are your assumptions sound? Does your reasoning follow naturally from the evidence? Reflection allows you to identify gaps, correct mistakes, and strengthen the framework of your thinking. The mind that reflects is the mind that learns, and the mind that learns is the mind that acts with intelligence. Clarity is the ultimate goal of structured thinking. When your thoughts are organized logically, decisions become easier, communication becomes clearer, and action becomes deliberate instead of reactive. You stop being swept away by emotion, by impulse, or by misleading assumptions. Instead, you act from a place of understanding, with a roadmap for how to move forward. Structuring your thoughts doesn't just make thinking correct. It makes life manageable, efficient, and productive. Finally, strategic thinking is about foresight. Once you have organized your ideas, you can anticipate consequences, weigh options, and plan your next move. A mind trained in structure sees patterns, predicts outcomes, and adapts to changing circumstances with agility. It is not a rigid mind, it is a disciplined mind capable of innovation and creativity precisely because it has a foundation of logic. So, as you practice structuring your thoughts, remember that correct thinking is more than having ideas. It is having ideas that are coherent, connected, and actionable. The chaos of the mind yields to clarity when structure guides it, and from that clarity comes the power to make decisions that are not only intelligent but transformative. A mind that is organized, reflective, and strategic is a mind that cannot be easily swayed, misled, or confused. It is the mind that sees the world as it is, acts decisively, and creates results that matter. Once you have learned to structure your thoughts logically, there is another force that can quietly sabotage even the clearest reasoning: your emotions. Emotions are powerful, unavoidable, and often misleading, yet they are an integral part of the human experience. Correct thinking does not mean eliminating emotions. It means understanding them, observing them, and learning to prevent them from hijacking your decisions. Emotional mastery is not about suppression, it is about awareness, balance, and intentional response. Most people think that emotions are either good or bad, helpful or harmful. But the truth is, emotions are information. They are signals about what matters to you, what you fear, what you desire, and what you need to pay attention to. The problem arises when we confuse these signals with reality or let them dictate action without reflection. Anger can cloud judgment, fear can create imaginary barriers, and desire can blind you to consequences. Observing your emotions without immediately acting on them is the first step toward clarity. The key to emotional mastery is noticing the difference between a reaction and a response. A reaction is immediate, impulsive, often unconsidered. A response is deliberate, thoughtful, and informed. By pausing, even for a few seconds, to observe what you are feeling and why you are feeling it, you create a space where reason and logic can intervene. This pause is deceptively simple, but it is transformative. It allows you to decide whether your emotion is guiding you correctly, or whether it is a distraction that must be acknowledged but not acted upon. Another critical skill is detachment. Detachment does not mean indifference. It means the ability to step outside the intensity of an emotion and view it objectively. For example, when you feel frustration rising during a disagreement, instead of letting that frustration escalate your response, you can observe it. I am frustrated because my expectations are not being met. By naming it and seeing it for what it is, you remove the automatic power it has over your decisions. Detachment allows your mind to operate with the calm clarity necessary for correct thinking. Emotional mastery also involves channeling emotions constructively. Emotions are energy. They can paralyze or they can propel you forward. Fear, for example, can be used as a motivator to prepare, plan, and act cautiously rather than letting it immobilize you. Anger can highlight injustice or motivate change rather than leading to reckless action. When you learn to harness emotional energy and direct it toward productive outcomes, your thinking becomes sharper, more focused, and more resilient. Furthermore, self-awareness is essential. Understanding your emotional triggers, the situations, words, or patterns that consistently provoke strong reactions, gives you a map for navigating your inner world. Once you recognize these triggers, you can anticipate them, adjust your thinking, and respond with intention rather than habit. Emotional mastery is a form of self-discipline, and like any skill, it improves with practice and reflection. Ultimately, correct thinking is not purely intellectual, it is integrated. A mind that can reason clearly but is ruled by uncontrolled emotion is vulnerable. A mind that can observe emotions but never acts on reason is incomplete. True mastery comes when thought and feeling are aligned, when logic guides action and emotion informs it. This balance allows decisions to be made from strength, clarity, and insight, rather than confusion or impulsivity. By observing your emotions, pausing before reacting, detaching without dismissing, and channeling energy constructively, you create a mind capable of thinking with precision and acting with wisdom. Emotions no longer control you, they become allies that deepen understanding, heighten awareness, and strengthen resolve. The mind that masters emotions does not fear challenges, does not crumble under pressure, and does not fall prey to impulses. It sees clearly, decides deliberately, and acts with power. Once you have mastered awareness, clarity, questioning, logical structure, and emotional balance, there remains one final, essential step: making correct thinking a lifelong habit. Knowledge alone is not enough, insight alone is not enough. The mind that thinks correctly is not formed in a single lesson or a single moment of clarity. It is cultivated through consistent practice, reflection, and discipline. Thinking correctly is a habit, and like any habit, it requires intention, persistence, and reinforcement. The first element of lifelong critical thinking is routine. You must create structures in your daily life that encourage reflection and mental organization. This can be as simple as taking a few minutes each morning to examine your goals, or as deliberate as journaling your thoughts and decisions at the end of each day. By regularly examining your thinking, you reinforce the skills you have developed: awareness of thought patterns, separation of fact from assumption, disciplined questioning, logical structuring, and emotional mastery. Habits, once established, shape the mind automatically. The more consistent your practice, the more your mind defaults to correct thinking even under pressure. Another vital aspect is openness. Lifelong critical thinking requires a mind willing to learn, adapt, and revise itself. No matter how disciplined you are, you will encounter new information, new perspectives, and new challenges. A mind that clings rigidly to old assumptions or that fears admitting mistakes cannot think correctly. Correct thinking demands humility, the recognition that you do not know everything, and that growth comes from curiosity and inquiry. Every new experience, every conversation, every challenge is an opportunity to refine your thinking. Treat your mind as a living instrument, constantly tuned and adjusted. Equally important is reflection. Thinking correctly is not merely about reacting to problems in real time, it is about stepping back, evaluating past decisions, and learning from them. Reflection allows you to identify errors, recognize biases, and understand patterns in your thinking. Without reflection, even the most disciplined mind is vulnerable to repetition of the same mistakes. By making reflection a regular practice, you create a feedback loop that strengthens your reasoning and sharpens your judgment. Discipline also plays a crucial role. The mind naturally seeks shortcuts, distractions, and immediate gratification. Developing a habit of correct thinking requires consistent effort to resist these temptations. It requires prioritizing clarity over convenience, inquiry over assumption, and deliberate response over impulsive reaction. Discipline is not restrictive, it is liberating. It allows the mind to operate with precision, even in the face of complexity or pressure. The mind that is disciplined becomes a reliable tool, capable of navigating uncertainty with confidence. Finally, integrating all these elements into daily life ensures that thinking correctly is not an occasional exercise, but a defining way of being. You begin to notice patterns, anticipate outcomes, make better decisions, and communicate with clarity. Your mind becomes a guide, not a slave to circumstance. Correct thinking shapes not just individual choices, but the trajectory of your life. It allows you to act intentionally rather than react habitually, to solve problems effectively rather than struggle endlessly, and to create results that matter. Remember, the journey of correct thinking is continuous. There is no endpoint, only progression. Every day presents a chance to observe, question, structure, regulate, and reflect. Every challenge is a test, and every decision is an opportunity to practice the habits of a mind trained in clarity and wisdom. The mind that commits to lifelong critical thinking becomes resilient, insightful, and unstoppable. By embedding these practices into your life, you ensure that correct thinking is not a skill you use occasionally, but the very way you experience the world. It becomes your compass, your filter, and your most powerful tool for navigating the complexities of life. A mind committed to lifelong critical thinking does not simply survive, it thrives, creates, and transforms every day without fail.